Put my microphone on. Good evening and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Governance Scrutiny Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information, England, Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. And may I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are on when you are speaking and off when you are not speaking. And can I also remind you to put your mobile phones on silent. We have with us tonight from outside, we have Max Armstrong and Greg Rubens from BDO and Mark Surridge from Mazars. And officers with us tonight are Peter Linfield, our Finance and Corporate Services Director, Sarah Whitaker, Service Manager Finance, Nick Berry, Senior Property Surveyor, and Marie Heald, Finance Business Partner. So welcome them and look forward to their contributions. I'd like to move now to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Sims, and we have Councillor Butler and Councillor Ellis substituting this evening.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. So item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of November 2023. There's a couple of officer responses to actions raised at the last meeting. Minute number 26, which was the action was in relation to West Bridgford Special Expenses and SIL Advisory Group. The group asked for a historical list of annuity charges, and that was given by email to members of the Scrutiny Group, which was sent out on the 19th of February from the Service Manager Finance. Councillor Thomas.
I've got some other questions to ask.
Okay. And secondly, minute number 26, item number 26. Councillor Thomas highlighted that the correspondence address for Rushcliffe Enterprises required updating with the current monitoring officer's details. The monitoring officer contacted Companies House to amend the correspondence addressee, and the address was given as the chief executive. So those were the action points from the last meeting. Councillor Thomas, you've got some points you'd like to raise before I can sign them off. Is that right?
Oh, they're not accuracy. They're
okay.
Matters arising. Is it all right if I raise them anyway? But things that need reporting back, basically.
Is there an opportunity to raise them elsewhere, or?
No.
Well, why don't you raise them?
Okay.
Then I'll tell you if I'll let you talk about it or not.
Okay. So the first was the West Bridgford Advisory Group, and I thought we'd ask if they could be made publicly. The minutes could be made publicly available, and that was taken away. And I don't think we've had a response.
I thought I'd seen a number of responses. Was that not covered? And is that so? With West Bridgford Advisory Group, can someone enlighten me, Mr. Linfield, Sarah?
It's the West Bridgford and Special Expenses member group, and those minutes, I believe, are available on the members' intranet.
So they're not publicly available.
Not that I'm aware of.
So they're the same as things like the growth boards we had, which are not publicly available either.
Sorry, I couldn't access them anyway, but I think we discussed about them should be publicly available for the West Bridgford Special Expenses Group. That was what we discussed, and it was taken away to be looked at.
Okay, well, I think if we put that as an action point and come back on, Mr. Linfield.
Well, as Carrie knows, I've been in dialogue separately with her on this matter. So the plan is to start making them available, and so that's what we will be doing.
Okay.
And the second thing is what's happening with the constitution changes, which were delayed last you know, they came through the minutes last time and they were going to be dealt with.
So they were dealt with. I think I at first said that they should come back through the group, and the monitoring officer contacted me and suggested that they didn't need to come through the group, to which I said, well, in which case there was a member working party. Can we send it back to the member working party to see if they think it should go through scrutiny again, or does it just go to full council to be, because it has to go to full council to be approved. So as far as I'm aware, the changes that were agreed upon by the member working group were then amended further as a result of some of the wording being ambiguous, I think is perhaps the right word. And I believe that that is that then is going to full council. Okay. Councillor Calvert.
Just to clarify what you said there, so it was recommended that we go to the working group, but as far
No, yes, I know what you're going to say, I think.
yeah,
But it didn't come back to the member working group.
No,
No, I asked for it to go back. It was the chair of the group and the chair of planning. I asked it to go back through them because the constitution changes were to do with planning, and whether they wanted it to go through scrutiny, come back here before it then went to full council. So it was the chair of the member working group and the chair of planning who made that decision, I believe.
in which case I hope we don't get any great shocks when the full council report appears.
And so do I. And I'll keep very quiet if there are any big shocks.
So there was a third thing, and that is, could we have a note for the minutes as to what happened about the request to add an extra opportunity risk on the subject of the affordable housing capital?
I think that was something that was left off the minutes previously, and it should have possibly been put in. Is that right? There's, again, you've had correspondence with Mr. Linfield, I believe, about it.
It was on the minutes
Yeah.
to be taken away to be considered by the risk management group, whatever that might be, and there's no report come back to the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Linfield, do you want to?
Well, we've got risk management on the agenda, so perhaps we could pick it up in that particular item.
Okay. Councillor Calvert.
I too would like to ask another question,
Okay.
which is a matters arising, I think, because I don't think it's anywhere else in the agenda.
Okay.
And that's to do with paragraph 24, where Mr. Armstrong provided the group with a sector update from the autumn statement. And at the end of that paragraph, it says it was noted that, this is with regard to planning, it was noted that with regards to the planning reform, the details are yet to be finalised. And what I'm curious to know is whether all the issue about getting extra fees and charges has been finalised. Maybe Councillor Butler can help as well.
Is that something you can answer, do you think, Councillor Butler?
Sorry.
So within the minutes under 24, isn't it? I'm just having a quick look.
This is the third paragraph. Third paragraph of paragraph 24.
It was, so we were looking for a sector update from the Chancellor's autumn statement advising there'll be changes to the planning process, including central government support on larger applications and a freeze on business rates to support the, is that the one? No, that's not. It is. No. And a freeze on business rates to support the retail and hospitality sector. It was noted that with regard to the planning reform, the details are yet to be finalised. Actually, Mr. Linfield will answer it.
Yeah, well, the details are still to be.
Yeah, that's. I thought you might say that.
So it's to do with the Levelling Up Act.
Yeah.
Which is, as with a lot of government things, they announce things and we don't get detail quite some time after.
Yeah. Okay.
And potentially, it seemed to offer quite a lot of extra income into our planning service, but clearly there's nothing.
Yeah, probably not to confuse matters, but there's a difference between planning fees have gone up, and that's quoted in the budget itself. So they went up from, I think it was December time. So some of the fees have gone up, but the confusion is more about the Levelling Up Act, which is slightly different, and that's got more some other things that need sorting out to do with planning.
Okay, any further questions or points on the minutes? So is everyone happy if I now sign those minutes off? Thank you. Right. Item 4 on the agenda then is the annual audit letter and value for money conclusion, which will be presented to us by Mark Surridge from Mazars. And I'll just note that it's recommended that the Government Scrutiny Group note the receipt of the annual audit letter. So if I can ask you to.
Certainly, thank you. The Auditor's Annual Report is the accumulation of and summary of all the work that we do under our responsibilities. Its intention is to be presented in a public document and arena to provide assurance and a summary of the findings of our work. A lot of that is covered already. So in the previous meeting, my colleague Bethan came and gave you the findings of the financial statements. And a lot of that is repeated in here because it's brought together. The bits that are predominantly new start from page 20 of the pack, which essentially is called our commentary on the authority's arrangements to secure value for money. Page 21 sets out the kind of the background and the framework, and page 22 gives you an overall dashboard. So our responsibilities fall under 3 themes: financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. Our responsibilities are to examine the kind of arrangements that are in place, and if we believe there's an indicator of significant weakness, then we will delve further into that. And as you can see from this, we did not identify any significant risks of significant weaknesses, and we have made no specific recommendations for improvement. The report itself then flows into a high-level summary of the things that we've looked at that underpin those arrangements for financial sustainability, for example, and our assessment of whether or not those are accurate, adequate. There's clearly a lot of financial challenge in the across the sector, and we do consider the extent of reserves the authority has. Page 25 includes a few graphs and some comparatives in there, and that's designed to ensure that there's an underpinning backdrop to the authority's financial position, so that when it sets its medium-term financial strategy, that it's able to achieve balance in that. It's not to understate the extent of challenges that are ahead and the need to make decisions, but it does provide some confidence and assurance that the authority's processes for securing reserves, for setting its budget, and for its budgetary control and the reports that come through to you are, and it's a terrible word that we use, but they are adequate. The section on governance starts from page 27. Again, it runs through a few things, including governance structure, the medium-term financial strategy. We've made a couple of observations around how the authority operates in this area, including an observation on this committee. We are not doing them as recommendations. They are just observations, and there is a difference between that. A recommendation says you must do something about it. Our observations are intended to bring insight and perspective from our experiences elsewhere. Section 3 starts on around page 30 of the pack and goes into a high-level summary confirming that things such as performance monitoring and performance management, the corporate plan, and how you work with key partners. Again, the arrangements around that we've seen us sound. Section 4 runs into our reporting responsibilities and our fees are set out in section 4. There's a moderate decrease over the previous year, but that reflects the work that we've done. The appendices really just draw back from the work that you've seen before, so I wouldn't intend to go into any detail on that one. That's it. That means the work on the 22-23 year end is fully completed. There's one administrative aspect that we're unable to finish at the moment, called the certificate, which officially closes the work. That's just down to we're still awaiting some final information from the National Audit Office. So for all intents and purposes, the work is complete apart from the issuing of the certificate. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the internal audit report? Councillor Thomas?
Yes, the observation on this group was that most councils have a separate audit committee and that it's separate from scrutiny. I was just wondering if is that a recommendation then that we separate the two, or not quite that strong?
It's an observation that we've discussed with officers, and it's one that for consideration of what works for you as a committee. So, and the big difference is scrutiny really focuses on policy. So obviously, if you think about the piece you had around the Constitution, if I use that as an example, obviously you spent a lot of time, and it is right to have a scrutiny function. An audit committee would be looking at, is there a process in place, and is it effective to review the Constitution? And those are two very different skill sets. And when they get merged, sometimes you can spend so much time on scrutiny that you miss the assurance, and vice versa. So our view is just, look, other places have an audit committee. Potentially that it could come down in the future that you will be required, you'll be forced into the direction of having an audit committee and separating it off. All we're saying is, if it works for you, it works for you. But there is an alternative.
I think it's possibly fair to say that if you look at our scrutiny groups, the other two, obviously we've got a corporate overview, but the other two scrutiny groups, I always describe those as the ones that are the sort of forward-looking, and this one is the looking in your wing mirrors and checking what we've already done. And largely that is, so in a way you could argue that it does the work of an audit committee, because that doesn't mean to say we don't look at some scrutiny things like, as you say, the Constitution. I don't know if you're aware, I'm sure you are, that we've just had a corporate peer review challenge. It'd be interesting. I know they interviewed the chairs of the scrutiny groups and we had quite a long discussion. It'd be interesting to see if they come up with any comments, I guess, or recommendations. And certainly last time we had a corporate peer review, there were some quite big recommendations on changing scrutiny, which were implemented. So just be interesting to see in the light of perhaps your comment. Any other questions from Councillor Gowden?
Excuse me, thank you. I guess you do this for other councils, and clearly we've got data here comparing us with other councils in Nottinghamshire. I just wondered if you're aware of any other councils that have 300% of service expenditure in reserves at this stage. Are we a real outlier nationally?
So before you answer that, I'll just clarify that there is paragraph 4.4. It does state that figure is actually incorrect. So whilst the chart in the actual report itself, the covering report.
Oh, okay. Well,
so it's being corrected. It's about 200%, which is
still okay. 200%.
The short answer is I don't know, but we have provided a link to where we got all the data from.
Right. Okay.
So and we did that deliberately so that if you would like to go and have a look, you can.
Thank you.
Just to on the reserves, you shouldn't just look at reserves as a snapshot. Often the auditors, when they're looking at reserves, it's more the fact that many councils are running out of reserves, and that's where the criticism tends to be. So for us, that's a snapshot now. Looking at the MTFS, you can see our reserves are going to go down quite substantially. and that's where our risk is. To be perfectly honest, I don't get too hung up by the fact that it's showing 200% now when the reserves are going to be coming down.
Okay. Has anyone got any further questions? I suppose one thing I'd quite like to pick up, I think we may have sort of highlighted it before, but obviously your fees for next year, you mentioned, I'm bringing this up because you mentioned that your fees have come in under and there's a slight reduction, but obviously the next year there's a substantial increase in fees. Does that sort of, are you anticipating the length of time and effort, if you like, to complete the audit in the way it's needed?
We've got a verbal update on 23-24 in a second. Can I wrap that into that?
Yeah,
Because it is all interrelated to
yeah.
it.
If you're going to answer it within the
Yeah,
context of
sure.
the next item, yeah. Councillor Ellis.
Is it worth considering the issue of a separate audit committee? This is I've been on two councils in Derbyshire, the County Council and the North East Derbyshire District Council, and both had audit committees. I found it slightly strange when I came here that there wasn't one.
I suppose I, on the other hand, have only known this council and never not known an audit committee. So, Mr. Linfield.
Sorry.
I think we can get a bit hung up on the names of what it's called, to be honest. I mean, we could actually call this an audit committee.
Well, I think that was the point I was making about,
because in essence,
what's
most
the
of what we
function of
do
this group versus others.
is the audit committee. It's just whether, I suppose the issue is if there's any bolt-ons that we shouldn't be doing, whether they need moving somewhere else, rather than necessarily creating another. Because to be frank, if you had another audit committee, this group wouldn't exist because they wouldn't have enough to do.
Yeah, I think that was the point I was trying to make when I was distinguishing the role of this scrutiny group versus the role of the other scrutiny groups. Mr. Linfield.
I was just going to raise one other point, which is in that section, which is about having an independent auditor, an independent person on the committee, which is something this group has considered before. We probably bring a paper back again because I think pretty much all of this group is different now. So, but previously it was rejected.
Right.
From the Redmond review, it is one of the strong features. There's a challenge in actual fact actually getting the right person as well and keeping the right person. So which is a separate argument. Yeah. But I know some authorities in Nottinghamshire, they have tried and they've struggled to get independent members on the committee.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not got the best selling point, I guess, to attract people. So, but anyway, so that is
tell us something about finance.
So, I mean, it's
very important.
It's a very important. It's important, obviously, but so it might be we perhaps bring a paper. Perhaps need to think about on the forward plan. We could bring a paper back with a view to getting
just discussing that again.
Okay. Yeah, to bring it back to this group.
Okay, well, I'm happy to consider that. If there's no other questions, then we can move on to item 5, which is the external annual audit plan for moving forward. So, Mr. Mark Surridge again, please.
Certainly. So, the 23-24 financial year, within the context of where we're at, and I think the covering report of the previous paper mentioned some of the issues around backlog and timing, etc. The consequence of that for this council in itself meant we put a moratorium on the planning process because what has now been released is a consultation on what the code of audit practice would look like and therefore the scope of the audit work. When the scope of the audit work would change, there's a consequence on what work we do and being able to define our approach. Linked to that was the idea of what's called a backlog, which will be a drop dead date for old audit years and potential modified opinions, disclaimers on those numbers. And that date kept moving. So initially there was a potentially it would have been of March of this year, but that's moved to September. The consequence of that for us particularly, it was about coordinating our resources to be able to deliver a volume of work and bring everything back on track. So it's complicated. We've now got that clarity. So in the intervening period, we've been able to agree a timetable with officers of when we're going to come in and finish the deliver the 23-24 audit, which would take us through the summer with the intention of having all the work signed off and completed by September of this year, which is fully back on track. The audit fee that sits around that, the scale fee of 128,000, is linked to the change in the contract. So we move from a new, whilst we continue to be your auditors, we're moving from an old contract to a new contract. We do not set the fee. The fee is set by public sector audit appointments. We are just appointed on the basis of that. The scope of work that will come through, we are not anticipating any substantial changes in the scope of work. There are ongoing consultations about future changes, and the consultation also includes changes to earlier years, but not definitively to the 23-24 year end. So to the question before of do we think the work volume is going to increase, I would say not substantially. There's always elements that might pop in, and in the future for 24-25 there's some new accounting standards that are becoming our way around leases, etc. But those are all should all be dealt with by public sector audit appointments.
Okay. Right. Yeah, obviously it's something, as you say, it's not set by yourselves, it's set by someone else, so we're very much in their hands, not yours, I guess. But I think it did stand out a bit, shall we say. And I was sort of, my assumption, but to be honest, my assumption was that perhaps that, was that there was more work involved. So, okay, Mr. Linfield.
Just a couple of comments really. One, something I should have said actually with the last item. I mean, we're one of the few authorities that can have that sort of level of report, where in actual fact we're pretty much up to date. There's very few councils who can actually say that. Probably around 10%, I think, was the last statistic I saw. So I don't think when you get these reports, they don't look particularly exciting, because the auditors don't want to shout from the rooftops necessarily. But I think it's only right that we, I want to thank the officers, members, obviously thank the audit team, because it does take quite a bit of work to keep everything on track. And thankfully we haven't got some of the issues the other councils have got, which is all to do with the backlog. Some of them are 2-3 years behind on their accounts. So I think we should just reflect on that.
Okay.
And the other thing I was going to say on the fees, there's a potential, because they're still looking at audit standards. There's still questions about how much work we should be doing on PPE, plant, property and equipment, and pensions. So depending where that goes, there's potential in theory that if that work reduces and it's deemed, if you like, less important, that the fees could actually reduce.
Okay. Councillor.
I was going to, you partially answered my question actually, because we do often hear about other councils and authorities near and far who, for one reason or another, seem to be quite a long way behind getting their audits published and prepared. And I was just wondering, sort of, and again, I think you probably answered it, but just how are we compared to the comparable authorities? I suspect from what you're saying we're pretty good, but is there any sort of information available as to? So I'm not saying league tables or anything like that, but are we pretty good at it compared to others? Putting it simply, I suppose.
There are there's not league tables, but information is published every month by public sector audit appointments. So that information does come out. I can't give you a figure nationally of where it's at. What I can say this. So the accountant's opinion was signed off in December, which was definitely on the is actually on the early side in comparison to the vast majority of March 23 year ends. So that side of it worked really nicely. This report is due within 3 months of issuing that timetable. As a firm and across my client base, you're towards the topper end. We've actually completed quite the majority of 23 year ends actually, but that's just one firm. We audit about 18% of the market. So obviously 72% is dealt with elsewhere, and there are a few firms that are 3-4 years behind. But I can say two things which are realistic. Getting to this point isn't about the speed; it's about the accuracy. And the accuracy comes from good quality working papers that come out of the finance team, good quality sets of financial statements, and working collaboratively to get through those things, even where there are tricky issues. And the fact is, we've issued a clean audit opinion on a set of financial statements that keeps you on track. And because it's recent, as you're setting your 24-25 budgets, etc., you're in a place where you've got assurances over your position. And where you don't have those financial statements, where the opinions aren't in place, there's a much greater question mark over an authority's ability to set its plans going forward. So I can't give you a league table. I won't give you a league table. But for me, and this is why I go back to our point of our intent is to get everything back on track, because we believe in doing this work robustly. Our quality record with the regulator is very, very good, because it has a consequence. And normally it's the silent assurance is what you're looking for as an authority. As Pete says, we don't shout from the hilltops when things are okay, but you would know if it's going wrong. You only know if it's going wrong if we're on time. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just curious, I didn't really pick it up on who controls the increase in the fees. Is it the government body that does it?
It's through a competitive tender, and then public sector audit appointments set what they call it a scale fee. And the scale fee isn't necessarily that to complete the audit; it's to cover the cost of the contract. And as Pete says, that they will, each year they review the scope of work on whether or not it's appropriate. So if our scope of work goes down, they will revisit the scale fee to come down. Conversely, if the code increases in scope, it goes up. And I do believe there is a mechanism within that contract that if essentially it makes some kind of surplus, it will redistribute those funds through to the constituent member bodies.
Okay, everyone content with what we've heard so far? Yes, good. Okay, thanks a lot, Mark. I don't know if you're going to stay for the rest of the meeting. I know sometimes you do, just because you like to see what's going on internally, but don't feel obliged to. So thank you very much for your presentations. So that brings us on to item 6 on the agenda, which is our internal audit progress report from BDO. So if I can hand that over to Max Armstrong from BDO.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting our progress report, which includes the executive summary to 3 audit reports in there. I'll then pause for questions before passing over to Greg for the 3-year strategy, which is the next item on the agenda. So to start with, I'd like to start on page 46 of your packs, which shows our progress table for the 23-24 internal audit programme. So you'll see we've made good progress so far in the year with only 3 reviews outstanding. and all of these are in progress. Either the field work's been delivered or scoped, and are due to be brought to this committee in May with our annual opinion as well. So we've made good progress throughout the year, and we're on in those timelines to meet that deadline. Firstly, starting with the Country Parks income review. So this was a review principally of the Rushcliffe Country Park and the income collected on site. So it covered both cash collection from the point of collection to banking, and looking at the controls around that, so covering security, accuracy of collection, etc. But also through license arrangements with third parties on the country park, again, from the invoicing process to collection and the accuracy of that. For this review, we provided moderate assurance over control design and substantial over the control effectiveness. And that moderate opinion was sort of driven mainly by the one medium finding, which relates to the process for collecting and banking cash where there wasn't a separation of duties, which we would typically expect to see. And it is required by the council's financial regulations. So what is positive to see is from the management response where it's been accepted, and actually from the 22nd of January, we understand the process is in place and to have this incorporated. BDO will follow up on this recommendation next follow-up to confirm it's been implemented. But from the management response, we understand controls have been put in place for that. There were two low findings we raised as well within this review, and less of a priority, but still sort of worth noting. So one was around the receipts being provided for ranger-led activities, and secondly, around procedure notes for the cash taking to support sort of continuity processes and ensure consistency of process ultimately. And moving on to the next review, which was the governance of partnership arrangements review, where we provided substantial assurance over the design and effectiveness with one low finding. So this review focused on 4 different partnerships that the council are in with other local authorities. And the aim really was looking at the governance from the council's perspective. So how information was sort of fed from the partnership groups and those meetings back into council's arrangements, also looking at the reporting and getting understanding of our roles and responsibilities clearly defined and then followed. So there was one low finding raised in this review relating to the terms of reference for the SNC CSP, so the Community Safety Partnership, which basically hadn't been updated and formally approved by all parties. Again, positive to see from the management response that there is a process ongoing to review that terms of reference. So again, we'll follow up on that as it falls due. And then finally onto the grant management controls. So in our audit plan, we save a few contingency days for reviews like this, which wasn't in our original plan, but to be agreed with management over the year to offer a sort of flexible audit service and support the council as it's required throughout the year. So we were asked to undertake a review of the grant management controls specifically for the LAD3 grant, which the council received money to administer from the Midlands Net Zero Hub. Again, it was a substantial opinion on both design and effectiveness with 2 low findings. And this review sort of principally focused on the strength of those controls for administering the grant from the point in which an application is received to the payment being made. And this grant was delivered by E.ON. So the payment part was around paying that provider to provide those services. And so again, just to pick out on the 2 findings, we did raise the low findings. So one was around the lack of preventative fraud measures being in place from the start. So I think probably the word fraud tends to sort of bring up an element of fright, but it was around that sort of preventative element as opposed to detective. So having sort of clear controls in place to ensure people are aware of, in the specific instance raised, the fact that the council paying the grant and the contractor shouldn't be requesting it on the doorstep. And then secondly, the payment to E.ON for the final part of the arrangement hadn't been paid at the time of our review, and this was due to a purchase order hadn't been raised at the time. But again, from management response, we see this. Well, the aim was to deliver this by mid-December. We've got a few articles in our sector update. I won't go into detail on them, so obviously there's a lot of items on the agenda for the committee. But if there's any questions on any of those 3 reports or the sector update, I'll pause here and invite any questions.
before I take questions, I just want to point out on paragraph 4.2, it says there are 4 reports, but there were only 3, so it's just a correction to that.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Yeah,
Decide whether it was yourself or Councillor Thomas who had their hand up first. So.
Okay. Yeah, the report mentioned in the last one about 10 properties were reviewed. I was just wondering how many properties actually received funding, bearing in mind that it's quite a substantial amount of money involved. And also, I'd like to know what tenure those properties are, whether they're social housing. Thank you.
So I don't have the figure in front of me for the overall number of properties, but from memory, it was in the region of sort of, it wasn't a huge amount. So I think our sample covered around sort of 10 to 15% of the overall population. And that's principally because there wasn't a huge amount overall. And then of those properties we did review, that there was a balance. So it wasn't all social housing. And there was a balance between sort of different recipients of the grant. It was a haphazard sample selection. So that was done deliberately. To avoid it being all at the same time.
Councillor Thomas.
No, I don't think those particular grants were for social housing. I think they were for owner occupied. So.
Yeah, apologies. I'll have to refer back to the sample to get a detail of what the breakdown was, but I'm happy to provide that outside of this.
That wasn't my question. My question was about the fraud incident that was reported on. And I think it might be worth noting that the frauds are not just subcontractors asking for money in the situations. The fact that a group of houses in an area are being targeted for grants means that they're also targeted by phone calls for people pretending that they're something to do with it. So I think that the whole issue of fraud is something that we can, because they were targeted into Eastleigh, which is my ward. It's something we came across a spate of telephone calls. You know, we're from your local energy advisor ones, even more than usual, really. So I think I don't know if that can be picked up as well when the action is being looked at. And also, the other side of it is it leads to a huge amount of suspicion from the people who could be recipients of these grants, and you knock on the door to make people aware of the schemes, even though you've been said that you're coming and you've got badges and all the rest of it, and basically they shut the door in your face because they think it's a scam. So I think there's two sides of it. There's a possibility of people being scammed because of the raising profile of it, but also the possibility that people will miss out because they're wary of it being scammed.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say that there's a rise of them in Eastleigh. I think it's if you've got an 01509 telephone prefix, because I think we all get them. I'm not quite sure where. Obviously, that is a big issue, and you know we all get fed up with someone ringing to tell that they're giving us a government grant or the government have made a grant available, and we'll give you new loft insulation. Or a while ago it was, and we'll pay for your electric charging point for your car, and you end up with a bill where you quite clearly feel that they've charged you X and the government have given them Y, and probably the actual cost was X minus Y. So, if that makes sense, I'm not sure quite what. At the end of the day, they are external companies, and there's not really. I don't think. I'm not sure. I don't know how we can control those other than through trading standards or whatever.
I was just going to say, and just to point out that it refers to fraud, but there wasn't actually any identified. It was just the fact that it's possible.
I was going to, yeah.
Also, I agree with what you're saying there. It's in terms of the audit that's been done on the grant management. It's the scope of the audit will only be potential fraud that we're in control of. Obviously, those incidences that you're talking about with telephone calls aren't within our control, but there is always the option. We've got other schemes that we've put into place, but we always say that the customer can call the RCCC to verify that the person that they're talking to is from Rushcliffe. I'm not sure what more we can do other than that.
Did you want to? Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, that answers the question. Yeah. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, just on the ranger-led activities, I was surprised to read that no invoices were raised because that's a legal requirement when you're selling any goods or services. Do we have any more information on how long that's been going on and how we arrived in a place where effectively Rushcliffe Borough Council was providing services to somebody yet not producing invoices? Do you have any more information on that?
So our sample went back 12 months from the review was done. So I can only comment on that 12-month period. To be clear, so it's activities that are delivered on the day, the person pays on the day. And in this instance, or in terms of this process, they're not provided with a receipt to say, and the amounts are quite sort of low amounts as well, but they're not provided with a receipt to say that cash has been received. So our review was from an audit trail perspective, and we couldn't see that there was those receipts being collected there. It is documented from a process side around those receipts on a spreadsheet, but that's not the source documentation we were looking at. So I can't give you an answer about how far back it goes, but our sample went back a year, and it's since then for sure.
Just to add to that as well, the ranger-led activities can be paid for in advance by the booking system, which can be done, and then obviously there'd be a record there. It's just these are people that are potentially turning up on the day that haven't booked in advance that would then pay cash at the door, so it's minimal numbers. But I appreciate what you're saying with the receipt should be issued.
Does that answer your question? Any other questions on that? So that's basically the progress report dealt with. So as a committee, we're asked to, it's recommended that the scrutiny group considers the Q3 progress report. And I think it's fair to say that we've considered it. If that's all right. So we could move on to item 7, which is the internal audit strategy. And that's over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. So this is our plan for the next financial year and also an indicative plan for the 2 years after that as well. You'll see from the plan, it's been based on your, or certainly links to your corporate risk register. So we've identified risks coming out of that. We've also met with individual members of the executive team, and the plan has been approved by the executive management team as a whole. So they are comfortable with it. As always, the plan is flexible. There's some contingency days in there. And obviously, if new risks arise, we will talk to management. And if necessary, any changes will be brought to this committee for approval. In terms of the reviews, there's 9 reviews there. There's the standard ones you'd expect around things like key financial systems, but we're also focusing in particularly on some of your financial management risks, given the the very difficult situation that all local authorities are facing at the moment. So there are reviews there around budgetary control, looking at procurement, fraud, looking at your workforce planning, which is clearly a sort of key element of your cost base. And we're also doing a targeted review on your disabled facilities grant, where there's been quite a lot of capital expenditure over the last year. There will also be some audits around some hot topics, which cybersecurity is clearly one, which is a risk for all local authorities. We also have audits planned on equality, diversity and inclusion, which again is a hot topic, and carbon management as well. So all of those hopefully link into some of the sort of key areas that the council is involved in at the moment. Very happy to take any comments or questions on the plan.
Have we got any comments or questions on the plan? Councillor Elm.
So I just wanted to find out more about the cybersecurity. What are the things you'll be checking, like firewalls or web applications and those kind of things?
So, I mean, obviously the detailed scope will be agreed with officers, but typically in a cyber audit, we would be looking at things like, what are your firewalls? Is your systems, are they up to date? Is the antivirus protection up to date? We will look to see whether all computers, all IT equipment has been updated. And we can do that and do a sort of some data analytics around that to make sure all of that is happening. We'll also look at things like your cyber policy and how does that compare to best practice. So a range of things, but we'll use an IT expert to do that piece of work.
Councillor Thomas.
So I was just noticing on page 83 that the council has recently moved its procurement function to Nottinghamshire County Council. The service was previously provided by Welland Procurement Shared Service. I didn't know that this had happened, and I was just wondering what the reason was for moving it.
Can you answer that? Or Peter?
We moved to Nottinghamshire County Council on a performance basis and just a negotiation with a local partnership.
I think it's fair to say that that's, if you like, your function to do that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't necessarily know because it's a commercial decision. So it's an operational decision.
Just that procurement does get audited, so
yeah,
it goes on the tab been audited, and
yeah. So the decision will be audited, as it were. Yeah.
Well, the performance of the
yeah, exactly. Okay. Any other questions? So again, we've been asked to. It's recommended that the scrutiny group review and approve, firstly, the internal audit strategy and plan, and secondly, the internal audit charter, which is on Appendix 1 of the internal strategy and plan. So are we satisfied that that's the case and happy to move on from that? Yep, good. Thank you. So item number 8. So thank you very much, gentlemen. If you once again, you're welcome to stay, but there'll be no bad marks against your decision if you want to leave. Item number 8 then is the asset management plan, and we've got Nick Berry with us tonight, who's our senior property surveyor. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you. We've undertaken an asset management review of our property portfolio. It's to provide the group with an update on the performance of the portfolio having regard to the property market, current and future risks, ongoing returns. Just a brief summary. Our report provides a brief summary of the portfolio. There's a slight correction to the report. There's 111 investment interests, not 99. It's split between 54 industrial, 37 offices, 16 retail, and 4 leisure. The portfolio generates 1.9 million of income, and around 40% of that income comes from the recently purchased investment properties. Year on year, our occupation rates are very high. Current year, our industrial occupation is 100%. Non-industrial is 97%, just over. Since the last review, we've constructed the Bingham Enterprise Centre, which is 12 self-contained office suites, ranging from 500 square foot to about 1100 square foot. They were let. 11 of the 12 were let within 4 months of the completion of the construction of the project. It's now fully let. So, having regard to all the portfolio, we've collected a lot of data, and that data has ranged from value, current and projected, rent, current and projected in 2028, return on investment yield, estimated refurbishment upgrade costs over 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, age of asset, current EPC rating, which is quite important, and then we've actually provided a risk rating, and that's based on 4 factors, which is statutory risk, which is currently not meeting EPC ratings or how close you are to the required EPC rating, condition risk, tenant covenant vacancy risk, and economic obsolescence risk. So, for example, in COVID, lots of these big office blocks are no longer required, so risks like that. Scoring wise, scoring for 1 is no risk, 10 is high risk. So the risk ratings are subjective and based on our professional judgment. So having gone through all the data, we've provided an appendix A, which is a graph which highlights some of the more well, it highlights risk and cost. So there's a couple which are highlighted, which are going to cost. Sorry, Appendix B. So Appendix A is the table, which is like a traffic light system, which highlights risk going up. So the highlights of the report, what our findings, the majority of all our properties are below 3.75 out of 10, which is deemed to be relatively low risk. We do have one exception, which is 6.5 out of 10, and that's the property at Walker's Yard, Unit 3. And the reason why that's a higher risk is it's got a higher EPC rating of 99, verging on an E, but it is a D. There's going to be upgrade costs, possibly if the government do bring in the requirement in 2027 to get to C grade of an EPC. And we've also got a lease expiry in a year. So those are the only reasons why that is a higher risk. Secondly, the majority of the properties have low maintenance costs, again with a couple of exceptions, which are the Point, which a Manvers Business Park. Point, we're looking at a £400,000 capital outlay in the next 1 to 5 years. And Manvers Business Park, 320. Regarding the Point, the costs, those are probably the worst case costs. So it's dependent on mechanical and electrical issues possibly coming up in the future. We have AC, which is 15 years old, which is nearing the end of its life, although it's in pretty good nick at the moment, and those costs might be pushed down, pushed back a few years. Manvers Business Park was built 25 years ago, and things like the roof will need updating or repairing or replacing at some point. But those costs are very much worst case scenarios going forward. But even considering the capital costs for those big items, taking into account the Point and the possible outlay there, you still, even with that outlay, you'd still be looking at a 7.7% return on asset value. Manvers Business Park at 7.3%. So they're still providing good income despite the possible capital costs in the future. Regarding the investment properties that we actually bought recently, none of those investment properties are identified as a risk or requiring significant capital outlay. Regarding the table, there are some of the higher, even though the risks aren't particularly high, some of the higher ones are actually discussed further in the later part of the report. We're looking, so there's more detail with Unit 3 Walker's Yard, Unit 1 Walker's Yard, the Business Park, Manvers Business Park, the Point, Phase 1 Colliers, which is again like the Business Park, Manvers Business Park, which was built 25 years ago, Canterbury Lane, Debdale Lane, and Bridgeford Hall. So there's a couple of, one important factor really to consider is the, obviously you've got condition risk, which is due to the age and end of life of certain parts of a building. But you've also got this, the MEES regulations, which require properties to meet certain EPC ratings by certain dates. So in April 2023, the lowest grade of EPC was an E. So all our property actually comes, I think there's about 4 or 5 E grades currently. They've changed the electricity factor on the EPCs. So we've redrafted all our EPCs, and if we were to do them again, we've probably got about 2 E-grade properties, which is quite a good result for quite a considerable portfolio. But currently, the requirement should be by 2027 we should be looking at C grade, but that hasn't actually been put into law yet, and is not likely to be put into law with this government, and it is sort of wait and see whether that actually comes into practice. If it does, that's when upgrade costs will be increased to meet those regulations. But has anybody got any questions?
Hello. Yeah. I have a question about why is this building and the Bingham Arena not included in the property report?
These are operational buildings, so this report is purely on our commercial estate, our income-producing estate.
So, at what point is the revenue or the yield on the Bingham Arena and this building scrutinised, and by whom?
That's the question I don't know the answer to.
The income budgets are included in our everyday budget monitoring process, so it goes to all of our groups, performance clinics, to service managers, and ultimately goes to corporate overview group as revenue monitoring.
Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I was just going to ask in terms of the energy performance of the buildings, if we have solar panels on the roofs, or if that's one of the things that's been considered, and are there grants available for that? Okay.
Mr. Berry, can you answer questions on
I think we've considered solar panels on all our operational property. But for something like, if we have thought about solar panels on, say, Mambers Business Park, but there's 30 different tenants there, and that electricity would probably have to feed into their meters and so forth. So it would be quite tricky to actually manage it. I think with solar panels, we're looking at funding to actually put solar panels on. So I think it's probably, from a practical point of view, quite tricky, but it's something that we could look at again. Absolutely.
Just to add, we do actively look at trying to get grants in for solar panels, and I think which leisure centre is it, Cotgrave, I think, where we've just got, I think, been awarded £250,000 for some solar panels. So the trick is just trying to get obviously the funding. Some funding is there, and it's just getting those bits in, and whether we're successful or not is in the lap of whoever decides.
So it's basically where we've got full control over a building.
Well, it just depends where the funding streams are.
Yeah.
At any time, it's just obviously the key thing is being aware where the funding streams are.
Just as a matter of interest, are EPC regulations the same for residential properties as they are for commercial properties, or are there differences? Because there must be some recognition.
They're calculated differently. So I think the government has brought in that residential EPCs are going to stick at E rating. Mm-hmm. So they haven't made any comment on commercial EPCs. So I think they may use the same computer software, but it's quite complicated, the software. So little things can make quite a big difference.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, the other question I had was about, I think it was the Candleby Lane, or maybe that one on Debdale Lane. There's a model whereby there's one tenant and it's sublet, and I was just wondering if that's a more inherently difficult model to manage, and whether there's any particular risks associated with that. Thank you.
So Canterbury Lane is, we actually own the ground underneath those units. The history behind it, the county council built the units and then they assigned their interest to private company. So we don't have control over that, and that was highlighted in the last report 2 years ago. Subsequently, we're looking at disposing of that. And that's been to cabinet and approved, subject to an overage agreement. We're still working through the documents on that, but you're right, we don't have as much control over it.
Okay, any further questions? Just on the recommendation here, we are. I think any comments we've made will be reported up to cabinet. So I think and it's more. I think the overall satisfaction, if you like, on the commercial portfolio. I think it's worth pointing out that the occupancy rates are extremely high. I think we've always had high rates, and I should think those are probably higher than most people's portfolios. So that's perhaps says something about the quality and the usefulness, if you like, where it's industrial or whatever. Obviously, yeah, they're obviously in demand, and the new offices at Bingham, I'm pleased to hear they're fully let, because I think, yeah, at one time we were it was quite slow to start with, wasn't it? There was a lot of people that wanted in straight away, and then the last 4 units, I think it was, were taking a while. So it's good to hear that that's fully let. Yeah. Yeah, and you actually, of course, you mentioned the change in the property market in terms of large office buildings, and of course we don't actually possess any of those, so I think we're fortunate in that instance. And there's been an increase in demand, I think it's fair to say, because of more people working from home. That actually the type of properties we've got suit people looking for less office space, basically. Yeah. Any further comments or points that people would raise? It's your opportunity to stick something in front of the cabinet, I think, is according to the recommendation. Okay, thank you very much. I think, you know, I think it's great to see that our portfolio is doing well. It's obviously an important part of Rushcliffe's medium-term financial strategy, so it's good to see. So thank you very much. And as with all the other presenters, feel free to stay, but you don't have to. Okay, so moving on to item 9, risk management progress report, which we're going to hear from Sarah Whittaker on.
Thank you. So this is the risk management progress report for the half-year point. The last update was on the 28th of September. This point in the pack starts at page 111. So we do a regular report on risk management, and it highlights any changes and any management activity that's happened since the last report. So since the last report, both registers have been reviewed as part of our the council's performance management process, and service managers have been reviewing the wording and looking to reword the risks in line with last year's audit recommendations and the training that we received. There are currently 38 corporate risks and 27 operational risks. This does move throughout the year and fluctuates in line with active risks. Appendix A has got the council's risk register, which has got the corporate and operational risks in. And there are no new risks to report at this one. And there are no risks have been removed prior to this meeting. There is one increase in the risks contained within the report, which is the cost of defending planning appeals. And there are 3 reductions to risk ratings, which are insufficient staff capacity, delivery of the core strategy, and the Afghan relocation project. And these are all detailed at paragraph 4.7 on page 112. And that summarises the main points of this report. and I'll try to answer any questions for you.
Okay. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've really picked up on the red writing here, risk increased, and to do with the large-scale residential developments. It seems to me that it would be worth investigating, maybe be members of the planning committee or whoever, looking into why the two applications that were mentioned, that the committee voted against the recommendations, that we really drilled down as to why that happened. Because there could be a whole variety of reasons. It could be the quality of the report, and I don't think that's the case, but I think it could be a lot of other issues underneath that. And it's really a case of having mitigation measures that we can take to avoid these situations arising in the future. Thank you.
So that's specifically at sort of planning, is it, and at risk, or?
It's specifically an issue where the risk has increased from 1 to 3, and I would have thought there ought to be some scrutiny of that as to why that's happening. And I'm sure we could come up with some reasons for it and be able to mitigate against it happening again.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can.
I just wonder, has it actually been? Sorry, it's gone. Has it gone to the Secretary of State and then come back as a? Have we lost the appeal? We have lost the appeal in both cases. Okay, that's good.
There is one coming up next week, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, we've lost one. Yes, we've lost one.
Not the one next week.
You can't predict that. We had that silk golden ball.
I think to answer Steve's question, I mean, at the end of the day, planning committee meets and discusses the application in front of it. Sometimes members will get it into their mind that despite what may well be a very strong report advising a particular recommendation, members may still be minded to go against that recommendation, which they're entitled to do. But whether there is perhaps a need for perhaps a little bit of further guidance and training as to why a particular recommendation will be made, and it's not. I mean, it's a close thing, isn't it, between the freedom of a committee to make its mind up on what it believes at the meeting, which is quite right, it's democracy, but at the same time balancing up with planning policy, both national and our own local policies. And if you're going to go against a recommendation that will have been recommended on a policy, national and local, you've got to be really sure as to why you're going against that recommendation. And it's not easy to do that. And that, I think, is the situation. But we don't want to fall into a danger of saying, well, you've got to always follow a recommendation, because that would then raise a question: what's the point of having a committee? But it's how does the committee work out, and is it sure that it's making its decision for the right reasons? And I think perhaps a little bit more guidance might be needed on that.
Can I ask, are we out of line with other councils on this? Because clearly, I haven't been on planning committee for a while, and when I was on it, there was a very, very long experienced planning officer, clearly, who pretty much told us that every time. And I guess what you just said is right. Maybe it's a rebalancing. I don't know. I'm not saying it is, but are we out of line with other councils, or is this sort of par for the course for other councils where we conservative previously in the small c, or are we now being completely haphazard in our planning decisions? So I'm looking at you. I don't know.
Well, I think, is it fair to say, as Councillor Butler's chair of planning?
Sorry, look at you. I look at you.
I was going to say, actually, part of the thing with appeals, of course, is that costs are only awarded if it's deemed that the committee have acted irresponsibly, as it were. Maladmit. So as long as those, and obviously we're always asked for
Right. Okay.
things on the committee, it's stressed to us that we have to have good reasons for rejecting something. And I think as long as those reasons are there and then that does give some protection from an appeal process, does it not?
Well, it should do.
It should do.
Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Thomas.
I think the two cases in point are both sites that have been approved in the local plan,
Yeah.
and one of which came up as a reserved matters application and was refused by committee. On that basis, I'm not sure about the other one.
Yeah.
I think it was a full application, but I think it's the robustness of putting the sites in the local plan in the first place, and the work that's done at that point to take them forward as so that when they come forward as sites, those conditions that are in the and issues that are in the local plan are robust. I would suggest that that's worth looking at.
Mm.
So, I just want to say that I wasn't trying to push blame on anybody, and I was thinking more of an informal discussion that as a member of the committee I go along and then we vote against it and then we turn up at the next meeting, and there's been no kind of thought or meeting or gathering to look at why that happened. And we heard how it happened because we sat in the committee.
Yeah.
I think it'd be useful to reflect on these things, particularly if there is a lot of money involved in losing a field.
I think we've all, obviously anyone who's on the committee has got a responsibility, obviously, to do what they think is the right thing, but also a responsibility to at least understand that it can cost money. I don't know, Councillor Butler, do you think it's something that if we, who would scrutinise those? It's really people on the planning committee being trained further, is it not?
I think yes, but I also think it could be for wider council as well, because there will be times when, for whatever reason, members who aren't on the planning committee may well sit on a planning committee one day, and it could be that one meeting where someone who might not be quite as familiar with the way planning works might, in all innocence, make a decision not necessarily for the right reasons. So I think it needs wider awareness.
Councillor Ellis.
Thanks, Chair. Most of these applications which are rejected have been the subject of significant debate. So a rejection or an overturning of officers' recommendations is not taken lightly. And I say that only as a substitute member, but I have been on planning committees on other councils, and I would say every council faces absolutely the same dilemma. You can't say to the planning committee, don't do this because it's a risk of costing the council money. Otherwise, as Richard said, why have a planning committee if you're going to tie their hands? I think it's just an inherent risk. It's the nature of the beast.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely with you, but I think that it's useful to reflect when it happens on why it happened. And the one that I'm thinking of in Keyworth, it was perhaps the problem was the fact that the site was allocated in the first place. And
I'm not sure if I have to declare an interest here, actually. I think I probably do, if we're going to talk specifically about sites. So, but that of course hasn't been heard yet. So
the flaw there, because I was actually on that committee, that site should never have been included in the first place. It was totally unsuitable.
Finish it off. Like all these things,
I definitely declare an interest.
Like all these things, there's always a number of contributory factors, and it's a matter of sifting through those.
I think, though, it's true to say that when we're on planning committee, when there is we do get feedback on appeals, and we'd normally, I'm just trying to think, do we not get told why an appeal has been upheld or turned down? Yeah. And why costs were awarded, because the reasons for the costs being awarded and they are always in the appeals decision.
And in fairness, we haven't, over the years, we haven't had too many appeal situations, and certainly ones that we have gone against us, and certainly to have ones where we've lost the appeal and costs have been awarded. It really is quite unusual for that to happen. So it's appearing, I think, as a risk, possibly appearing as a risk here, because it hasn't happened a great deal. But again, that's just my perception.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Say the same thing really, is that risk needs to be looked at over a very wide time scale, because it'll be nothing, and then you know what I mean. So if you average it out over the 10 years or whatever, I think it's perhaps the way of looking at it.
So from if you like our role, then looking at the risk management progress report is just something that we should bear in mind and be mindful when things go red.
It's the same next year then.
Sorry, and I just want to say a couple of things. And I agree with actually what Council. I mean, you beat me to the punch to what I was going to say, which was about it's about just training, keep the training going, the good habits, and just members understanding what they're doing. Because I suppose my only comment is, and I don't know, obviously we've got new members as well, just had them this year, so that might. I don't know if that's, it's a lot to it's so much taken when you're a new councillor, and if you're not used to planning and that type of thing. So I think just having those good habits, the ongoing training, should help with. It should ensure that everything is done as it should be done.
I think that's a good comment, but it's also, I think, a couple of things. Obviously, you can't, if you haven't done the training, you can't sit as a substitute on planning committee. But also, I think we try and emphasise, and this is for really member development as a committee, to encourage all councillors. All councillors should do planning training, because it's one of the key things they'll find in their wards, that people will be coming to them for planning matters, and if they haven't done any training, they can't really comment on a planning application. And we had this debate on the constitution about when sort of, if you like, we got slightly hung up, I think, in some ways on the fact that it had to be material planning considerations that were given, which of course that has to happen at committee if committee don't agree with the recommendation. So it is important, I think, that all councillors get that training, but it's also, I think that the fact that we have a risk management report, and that's a sort of, it's a progression, and we need to keep an eye on it. So I agree with you if it's worse.
Just one thing on the training, I think the best training is actually being on the committee and listening to the people who've been on it for a long time.
True.
You really get a sense of how things should be done.
Yeah. Okay.
We all know the reality is it is very difficult for all members, whether they're new members or old members of the planning committee or not, when they're faced with a planning application and they're getting an awful lot of phone calls and emails from their residents, quite rightly, who are usually up in arms about it, and members will act in the most appropriate way, and it's not easy. It is difficult, and that's another reason why we do sometimes, I think, find ourselves in these sort of situations. But as I say, without wishing to tempt Providence, it hasn't happened a great deal, and I certainly hope it won't continue to happen. But it's something we all have to be aware of.
Okay. Did you, Councillor Thomas, was there?
Just wanted to say something else about risks, but if we've finished on planning.
I think we've finished on planning. Yeah.
So there was the question that I raised earlier about the opportunity risk, and the other question I've got is on page 133. The criteria for actually deleting risks. What's the rationale for doing that? The question raised earlier was about the opportunity risk that I proposed adding last time. Thank you.
I'll just talk a bit about the deleting of risks then. I think, I can't remember what page they're on in your pack, 100 and... can't see the number on there, 132, 133, lists the deleted risks. These, in particular, these risks have been merged into those new risks that are on the previous appendix. In terms of deleting existing risks, if they haven't on this occasion been moved, it will be if it's no longer relevant. So, for example, the Afghan, I think we refer to the Afghan scheme, which if it comes to an end, it's no longer relevant. So then it would be deleted in that case. But the majority of these on this one are because they've been reworded. Sorry, your other question was about affordable housing. Yeah. Do you want to do that one, Pete?
Right, so firstly, an apology to Calis, so you won't get this very often, but it is going to be. It is being recorded. What should have happened is obviously Calis. I think she made a record. It was in September's meeting, which is when we last discussed this. So what should have happened either at the next meeting in December. Unfortunately, Calis wasn't there, so it might have been raised then. But in the actions, it should have been what's the response in the actions that should be articulated, or alternatively, in the risk paper now, we should have probably put something in to reflect what the issue was and what the decision was and the logic behind the decision. That's the so yeah. So so just to explain. So I think I wasn't at the meeting when you discussed the September meeting, but I think the actual risk was to do with the fact that council was seeing it as an opportunity because the council wasn't taking forward wasn't spending the money that's being allocated at the moment towards affordable housing, and therefore there's an opportunity to spend that money. That's correct, isn't it? So I've gone back. We've had our little discussion behind the scenes, as we tend to do from time to time. But what I was trying to explain to Caris is that there is a word in the risk there, which is on affordable housing. Bear with me a second. Which is it's NS28A, so it's on 2 pages. It's on page. Can't really read that one. It's what, sorry?
123.
123, page 123. And then we've got a more, because we've been looking at the word in the rest, it's repeated the word into check where we increase the word into. So it's changed. That's on page 130, I think. I'm reading it back. So it's it's called risk, OR NS28A, which has been reworded to affordable homes. Affordable homes not built in line with available funding as a result of insufficient levels of influence over house builders and registered providers, leading to missed targets and a lack of appropriate housing in the borough. So just to explain, what that is the risk as we see it, the sort of the main risk. Now to address that risk, we need the £4 million is effectively the mitigating factor. So that it's £4 million. There's actions in relation to what we use £4 million for to address the risk. And that's why we haven't put it in as a. So behind, it's hard to visualise this, but behind these risks, we do have actions and mitigation. So when we have what's in our performance monitoring system, all of the risks, there's always actions mitigation in relation to those. So within the actions and mitigation for that particular risk is the £4 million. That's not to dispute the point that I suppose the point that Caris really is making is about the speed and the visibility of using the £4 million, which has been spoken about on sort of many occasions, and there's been different either scrutiny groups that looked at this as well as cabinet, and as of course it's in the full council papers again as there's £4.7 million that needs to be used. Now the challenge we have as an authority in terms of the team, the housing team are doing lots of work behind the scenes and working with RFPs on this to try and look at what's best solutions at the moment to try and use the money. And it's not, as you can imagine, it's not particularly easy just to find affordable housing because it's difficult to find land in Rushcliffe to use, and mind anything else. So and that's a challenge. So there's a range of solutions, and these solutions have been discussed before in previous scrutiny meetings, which I can give you details on. What I will do, after this meeting, I will word this more articulately, shall we say, in a little paper, just to really in terms of what carries us at and why, and the reasons why it's not in as a separate risk. But it's basically because the opportunity that Carys is talking about is really the actions that we take in relation to the main risk that's already there.
Yeah. I don't think there's really a financial risk in terms of the fund, because if we just carry on banking it forever, it's not a risk to the council, really. The opportunity that's being missed is to provide social housing. Yeah, so there's, well, okay.
Not strictly true, because the chunk of the money is Section 106, and we've got to use that it has to be used by April 2032. So there is a clock ticking.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh, on another topic.
Mm.
A new topic.
A new topic. Well, I think actually Pete's offer there to continue the dialogue is, yeah.
So just an action. I'll articulate in a note to the group what I just said.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Birch. So patiently, you did put your hand up a while ago.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for remembering. I just want to touch on Rushcliffe Oaks. So obviously it's gone a bit wrong, as I understand it. Can I get a bit more information on the numbers? What's it costing the council? I know it's newly opened, but I would assume we have some numbers to feed back. And how has it gone wrong? Because it seems to me, just as a layperson really looking at it, as a business model, we could not have more data. We've got ONS data of how many people are dying. We know how many people are cremated as a percentage of those who have died. How has it gone so wrong that we are under the targets? Is there a reason? Is there any more information you could give the committee, really? Because obviously at the minute it seems to me it's loss making, and that is obviously going to be impacting the council's finances.
I don't have actual figures that I can give to you now, but when you say it's gone wrong, I think when we first came up with the business case, obviously that's based on estimations. So at the time, we don't have any historical data to go on. So you do research, like you say, look at data, but that's only an estimate. You can't predict how many people are going to sadly pass away. We did estimate a number of cremations per month, an average number, in order to come up with that business plan. And sadly, those numbers aren't being met at the moment, although they are currently increasing, you'll be pleased to know. But overall, the crematorium is a loss making to the council, so it's just not achieving as much income as we originally predicted.
Okay, so just to clarify, it's not loss making, it's just not being
it's not achieving
we
the
were hoping
target.
for.
Yeah.
So it's not actually hemorrhaging money.
No.
That's right.
Great, thank you.
So, and that was the concern, was that it's loss. Yeah, that was my understanding. It's not loss making, and I think it is very much down to the original forecast. Was, I think there was, it's easy to look at things in hindsight. It was assuming that it would be sort of maximum capacity right from the start, and as a new facility, it would have been much better to have assumed a slower build up, basically.
I think also, I think also sector wide are experiencing the same issue, and I think it's something anecdotally to do with COVID increasing the number of deaths prematurely that would normally be happening now. So it's sort of like impacting on the numbers that you would normally see.
And just to clarify, so when I say loss making, in my mind I was including the build cost. So obviously we've got the actual initial capital outlay of building the thing. Presumably in the business case and the planning, it was going to over time pay back that investment. So are we on target for that, is what I'm saying? Because obviously the running costs, we're probably breaking even or making some money by the sounds of it. I'm talking about the whole package, including the build costs. How is that looking in terms of the financial impact on the council?
it will recover, as you quite rightly say, that the cost of the build is factored into the return on the place itself. I think from memory, it probably has extended it slightly by reducing the amount of income in those early years, but that could be in the future mitigated by increases in the cremation fees to bring that back into line in later years.
Oh, just to add, there was a scrutiny review of it, so if you want to refer to those papers, that will hopefully give you enough information.
I think it's a big quick question. The risk on equal pay, which has come up a couple of times tonight, is there a specific issue that you have? And I imagine if you did, you may not want to share it now, or is this just a sort of generic risk that's associated with the whole sector, given what's happened?
I don't know the answer to that, but I believe it is a generic risk. I'm not aware of anything in terms of a specific risk.
I mean, just to add, if you look at the papers, actually, reading it, that is, the wrong one. So, yeah, equal pay. No, it's just, I think that the Sarah says it is a generic risk. So, there's no specific concerns, but obviously there's been lots of things on equal pay, but it's particularly affecting the bigger authorities rather than districts.
Well, that's what I was thinking, really, because you know your stuff. I think, you know, it's not like you're going to suddenly decide, fine, you've got a sector of people in some corner who you sort of, you know, forgotten, I hope, I'm sure. And presumably, you know, you're looking at this, so I guess that risk is quite low, hopefully.
Okay. Any further questions? So within the recommendation, obviously we've considered the content of the report, and then part B considers and makes recommendations on risks that have red alert status, and obviously Councillor Calvert's brought up some of those. And I think, is the committee happy that our recommendation on risks that have red alert status is that we constantly monitor them, and that, you know, we're aware that they're there, and we look, you know, continue to ask questions and ask why it's going that way and not the other way. Is that everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, item 10 on the agenda: capital and investment strategy, monitoring Q3. So I'm handing over to Marie Hild for that. So Marie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the third capital and investment strategy report for 23-24. The report starts with a look at the economic forecast. The UK economy is facing a weakening outlook. Recent figures show that the UK's economy fell into recession at the end of last year, and there are fears that this could be made worse unless the Bank of England cuts interest rates soon. Interest rates remain at 5.25%. The Monetary Policy Committee next meet on the 9th of May, and they could vote to cut base rates. Rates are expected to be about 5.1% at the end of the year, dropping to 4.5% in 2025 and 4.2% in 2026. Inflation continues to fall, albeit at a slower rate, and is forecast to be around 2.1% at the end of the year. Unemployment is increasing. It was 3.8% in December, and it's currently 4.3%, and is expected to trend around 5.2% by 25-26. Paragraph 4.5 looks at investment income. The council has budgeted to receive 1.36 million in interest receipts this year, and is expected to slightly exceed this, with current projections around about 1.4 million. That's net of Section 106s. Most of our short-term investments are exceeding the budget rate of 4.5%, but some of the long-term diversity funds have not been as positively affected. Overall, the council achieved an average interest rate of 5.11%, slightly better than Q2 and higher than the Treasury benchmark SONIA. Appendix A shows the range of investments held at the end of December. The council holds a diversified portfolio to protect itself from interest rates risk. The council holds just over 90 million in investments, 50 million held in relation to Section 106 and SIL agreements. 36 million of this is held in short-term fixed investments which vary in duration. The council continues to consider green investments that are compliant with the council's strategy, and we currently have 2 sustainable fixed-term deposits with Standard Chartered and an ESG liquidity account with HSBC. Paragraph 4.10 highlights the fluctuation in the fair value of the high interest earning diversified funds. They had dropped in value by 1.234 million at the start of the year. The fair value of these assets is still currently down, but to around about 1 million less than the purchase price. There is a statutory override in place until March 25, so the impact of this loss doesn't impact on the revenue accounts. It's uncertain what will happen after this date, but the risk going forward has been mitigated by appropriations to a pooled fund reserve. Capital, we're currently projecting an underspend of around 4 million due to savings on Bingham Arena and Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium and reprofiling support for registered housing providers to future years. Prudential indicators can be found in Appendix C. The expected investment position at the end of the financial year is around 55 million compared to the budget of 48 million, and that's to do with the reprofiling of the Section 106s. The capital financing requirement, which includes internal borrowing, is anticipated to be 9.5 million in 23-24 compared to the opening position of 13.3 million. The liability benchmark shows a projected credit balance of 45 million, indicating an excess of reserves and working capital over borrowing. Council has no need to borrow over the medium term. And then the ratio income from commercial and service investments as a percentage of net revenue streams is projected to be 8.8%, lower than budget due to the revised projections on the crematorium. Commercial investments can be seen in paragraph 20 onwards. The council minimises its exposure to risk by spreading its investments across sectors and avoids over-reliance on speculative activity. Currently, investment income from commercial activity accounts for 15% of the council's total income, well within the maximum of 30% stipulated in the investment strategy. So, to conclude, interest rates have stabilised and are having a positive effect on returns, but a weakening economic outlook is still having a negative effect on the capital value of some of the council's investments. There is a statutory override in place preventing any accounting loss impacting on the revenue accounts. This is due to end 31st of March 2025, so the council will continue to monitor the situation and take advice from our Treasury advisors. Has anyone got any questions?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Ellis.
Appendix A, the length of investment, where it's described as call, does that mean that it can be accessed immediately?
Yes, exactly.
So we have a number of accounts which can be accessed immediately, including over 5 million at HSBC and 5 million at Goldman Sachs, just as examples. So why do we invest over 2.5 million in HSB asset management at an interest rate of 0.5%? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so the HSBC ECG account That is a call account, but it isn't something that we would sort of get back tomorrow. We could do, but we do hold it for a longer term. The other HSBC account that you do mention is our day-to-day bank accounts.
So the one at 0.5% that's our daily bank account, and it's interest, low interest bearing. Yeah, okay. Well, makes it slightly different, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody on the Q3 monitoring? I think overall it's largely in good order. We know. So, Councillor Ellis.
Not a question, Chair, but I think an average return of 5.11 is not bad at all.
No. Well, I think that's a fair comment as well. So Marie, thank you for that. Again, the recommendation is that we consider the capital investment strategy and update position, which I think we've done. So, and Councillor Calvert is going to say that I haven't. So, what do you go? Oh, well spotted. That means I've got to. No, it's a format that we do recommendations at the beginning and the end. Do they differ?
Yeah, it's not been updated. It should.
Well spotted. Yeah,
We planted that to see if anyone would spot.
If you wish, you could go to the pub and celebrate on the way.
I've got a Mars bar for you.
Okay, and then so that leads us on then to item 11 on the agenda, which is the capital investment strategy going forwards. So over to Marie again.
Thank you. So this report details the capital and investment strategy for the next 5 years. In Appendix A, the strategy is broken down into 4 parts: the capital strategy and prudential indicators, the MRP statement, the TM strategy, and the last section is commercial investments. Paragraph 8 shows projected capital spend and how it is funded. There is no underlying need to borrow over the medium term. The impact on the capital financing requirements and investment balances is shown in Table 2, Paragraph 12. The capital financing requirement is reducing as repayments in the form of MRP and capital receipts applied reduce the balance. Investment balances taper off as a result of reserves being used from capital and revenue, and working capital is reducing as Section 106 monies in relation to education are no longer paid to the council. The MRP policy is detailed at paragraph 16 and 17 of the appendix, and this details the council's methodology for charging the cost of borrowing to the revenue account. Paragraph 18 details the Treasury strategy. Key points are the forecast for the UK economy, which we've just touched on in the previous report, so I'll not go over that again. Table 4, paragraph 25 shows anticipated interest receipts and assumed interest rates. A downward trend can be seen with both investment balances and interest rates falling over time. Tables 5 and 6 show the authorised limit and the operational boundary. Paragraph 33 shows the viability benchmark, again illustrating the council's lack of need to borrow. Table 10, paragraph 36 is a new indicator that looks at net income from commercial and service investments expressed as a percentage of net revenue streams. The increase from 24-25 onwards reflects rent increases and the full year effect of Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium and the Bingham Enterprise Centre. Paragraph 37 details the investment strategy. Treasury management limits are set for the purposes of minimising risks. These are set using third-party credit ratings and counterparties which are approved by the Council's Treasury advisors. Table 12 shows types of counterparties and their limits as internally approved to optimise our investment opportunities whilst mitigating risk. Paragraphs 64 to 76 cover the commercial investment policy and covers investments primarily for financial gain. This section looks at existing investments. PWLB borrowing is no longer permitted if there are any plans for commercial investment in the capital programme, so no further commercial activity is envisaged. A key indicator is the Council's reliance upon commercial income. The limit has been set at 30%, and Table 16 at paragraph 70 shows projections to be well within this limit. Paragraph 71 covers risk exposure indicators, and the charts depict how investments are diversified across the sector in order to minimise risk. Commercial investments held at 31st of March as shown in Appendix 3. Conclusion: the financial environment is facing uncertainty, and this brings with it risks. These are covered in the body of the strategy. By setting and following prudential indicators and managing risk through setting investment limits and diversifying investments, the Council has set a robust capital and investment strategy. Those of you who attended the Treasury training by Arlene Close will have noted the endorsement by our Treasury advisors of the Council's proportionate approach to both Treasury and commercial property investments. Paragraph 77 covers the importance of both member and officer training that will be provided again this year. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions on that? I think it's fairly comprehensive. I don't think there's any surprises. Actually, I know I don't think I've asked this before, and I possibly should have done, but when we say that we've set a ceiling of 30% from commercial investments, is that a SIPFA thing, or is that's our own setting? And obviously we're not, as you say, we're well within it. But so in fact, looking forwards, it's never going to be 30% anyway, is it? So is that a limit too high? That because it's in reality we're not going to.
A few years ago, it was around. I think we were around 22-23%, and the reason it's reduced is more because obviously there's limitations on us actually undertaking further commercial investments. Whereas if our other income streams are growing, then the proportion of commercial investment income stream is going to be less. So that's why it has relatively been reduced.
So leaving it at 30% is prudent, but not unreasonable. Okay, Councillor Butler.
Yes, paragraph 77 touches on what we were talking about earlier on with the red risk for planning. It refers to the member and officer training, and there's actually it refers to a policy here. The updated code requires local authorities to document formal and comprehensive training for members who are involved in this, and it's very similar, isn't it, to the world of planning? How we need to have people trained in that. So I'm pleased to see this, and also just make a comment that the recent Arlington Close, is it Arlington Close?
Arling Close.
Pardon?
Arling Close.
Arling Close.
That's right, isn't
Arling,
it? Arling, yeah.
Well, you can understand.
Arlington's a place in America.
Oh, okay. It's been a long day. But the financial advisors, that is always. I think it's interesting, even if you're not involved in the world of finance or the rest of it. It was a session we had a few weeks ago. I think was one of the better ones we've had in these sort of things in recent times. And so it's just an observation, really. But it was. I mean, I've been to a few over the years, but you always pick something new up. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah,
I think that's right, and I think we've made the point a few times that it was very pleasing to see that it wasn't just members of this committee who attended, but a lot of other people did, and I think everyone found that useful. And it is something that all of us as members ought to be conversant with. Okay, so the recommendation here is that it's quite lengthy. I'm not going to read it out verbatim, but so we're recommending that we've scrutinised this. We've asked a few questions, and we're being asked to recommend it for approval by full council. And there's 4 elements to it which have been covered in the report, which is the capital strategy, minimum revenue provision, treasury management strategy, and commercial investments. And I think we're all happy to approve that as a recommendation that's gone through scrutiny to go to full council. Good. Okay, so finally, number 12 on our agenda is the work programme. So back over to Sarah.
Thank you. So the work programme is actually scheduled for, currently shows as June 2024, but to be confirmed. I can now confirm that that is 30th of May, so slightly earlier than it was this year. The items on the programme at this stage aren't set to change. I've got nothing in there that I'm sort of expecting to move, except that the Constitution and Code of Conduct are the only ones that may or may not come to this group if there is anything that changes. So again, it is quite a packed agenda, but they are standard items that we do go through at each meeting. So it doesn't look like it should take any longer than our normal meetings.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, it's normally when it's school holidays, you don't have these important meetings, and sadly the 30th of May is the school half term. And I'm on holiday. And I'd prefer to be on holiday than here, but
yeah, do we need to look at that?
I was going to say, usually half term's later, isn't it? I've got it proposed. Well,
no, I think it wasn't fixed, and then certainly you said the 30th
I
of
thought it
May.
was the 30th of May. But if that is half term,
But that'll be in the meetings calendar that comes forward to full council, won't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
So school holidays are usually June, though, aren't they? Usually first week of June. Is it May?
So I take it you know it's half term because it's in your diary. Yeah.
So just to add, the reason it is the 30th of May is because we bring the annual governance statement to this group, which goes in the statement of accounts, which is published on the 1st of June.
Yeah.
And that's why it's gone in on the 30th of May. We couldn't have it any earlier because I think probably the week before is full council, which is when people know actually who's on the group. So
yeah.
So that's a practical issue of why
it's something we're going to have to
swallow,
suffer for those who've got holidays booked, I'm afraid, by the looks of it. But thank you for pointing it out. Okay, so everyone's happy with the work programme. So that brings the meeting to an end. I'd like to thank all the officers for giving up their time for all their presentations, which have been very comprehensive, and our external presenters. And I'd like to thank Max for sticking it out to the end as well. Well done. All part of the internal audit process, I know. But
Max, are you on a Japanese game show or something?
So yeah, thanks for everyone's participation, and safe journey.